Hi everyone. Today I wanted to go over how we were introduced to the autism world and Diagnosis Day, or as I like to call it, D-Day. This is really how our whole journey started. So Savannah was about 1.5 years old when she was in daycare, and at that time she was our only child. And at 2 years old, daycare moves kids that are in the 1.5 year room into the 2 year old room. So that was going to be a new transition. And I remember the director talking to me and saying, Savannah's not drinking out of a open cup yet. And there's a few concerns that we have about her. Now, she had only been in daycare for maybe a month, if that, when this was brought to my attention. So the director said, I don't really know if I'm going to be able to move her into the 2 year old room. And I thought, well, okay, what does that mean? What does that look like? So she said, we have a few concerns. Savannah doesn't seem to like the color green. And my reaction was, okay, I don't really like the color green. It's a big deal, right? And then she went on to tell me that Savannah didn't like the sound of the vacuum when they were vacuuming the room. Okay, a lot of kids don't. It's a vacuum, it's loud, it's scary, it's noisy. My 3-year-old now, he doesn't like the sound of the vacuum. He's terrified. And then she said, and she kind of plays on her own. She loves books, so she's always in the reading center. And all the other babies are playing and singing and dancing, and Savannah's in the corner and she's reading and flapping. She jumps up and down a lot. And I thought, well, she does that when she's happy. She jumps up and down and she flaps. And we thought it was adorable. When she was like a year old, 2 years old, I can remember her flapping. And we thought she was so cute. Didn't think anything of it. And the director said, you might want to have her evaluated by early intervention. They come into the daycare and, maybe they can evaluate her and see what's going on. So I agreed because sure, why not? What's the harm? What's going to happen, right? And I remember driving home from daycare that day and I was so just aggravated. And I mean, how could she say something like that about my little girl? Like, they don't even know her. They've been with her for maybe a month. How dare they try to say anything about her, right? And looking back now, I think if it was presented to me a different way, because it could have been a lot more effective. I probably wouldn't have been felt so like defensive, but it was brought to me really poorly. So she was evaluated by early intervention and they did express concerns. She was a late talker. I mean, really, I say late talker, she still doesn't talk, but she wasn't saying any words. And she was a late walker. She didn't start walking until she was like 18 months old. So right away they see delays and they wanted to start working with her. Okay, great, start working with her. So I remember she had her 2-year appointment with her pediatrician and I brought up my concerns to him and what the daycare had said. And I remember his reaction. Like, I still remember years later exactly what he said. Oh, she doesn't like the color green. That's no big deal. A lot of kids don't like the sound of the vacuum, He's like, really, you have nothing to worry about. If they want to do work with her and have her enrolled in early intervention, great. I mean, it's only going to help her no matter what, right? It's going to help any baby that's developing. That therapy helps babies tremendously. And I thought, okay, like, we're on the same page here. He feels the way I do about this. So knowing that he's a professional, I felt better. I felt validated when he said that. So she continued early intervention, and I remember we didn't see like a huge change. There was nothing real significant. So we scheduled an appointment with a specialist in St. Louis. And for anyone that has scheduled an appointment with a specialist, if you haven't yet, you'll find this out. We had to wait months to get in. I remember making that appointment in December, and we didn't get seen until April. So we finally get around to April, and she has her evaluation. Altogether, the evaluation was probably 3 or 4 hours long between them sitting down working with Savana and then the 8,000 questionnaire that I had, all the paperwork that I had to fill out. I mean, question after question. Can she jump? Can she jump on 1 foot? Can she jump with 2 feet? Can she roll? Does she use her pointer and her index finger? Can she hold a fork? I mean, just every question under the sun. It makes you reevaluate yourself as a parent and what you actually witness your child doing. And you start to question if they can even really walk, even though you see them walk all the time, because there's just so many questions and they all start to look the same after a while. So I remember they had evaluated her. I had answered all their questions. We did the dance. She did the tricks. And the specialist sat down with me and she said, okay, we feel like she has autism. And I said, what? And she said, yeah, she has autism. Just based on what we've seen today and where she falls developmentally. And they showed me graphs, which I love graphs. And where she was on the graph, where she needed to be, the number that she was in comparison, if 0 was at the bottom and 100 was the highest, she was like 10. And I was shocked. I was shocked. And my husband was sitting next to me. And at this point, he was done. I remember he picked Savannah up and strapped her back in her stroller. He was ready to go. He's like, okay, I'm gonna go take her to the car. I'll see you outside. And I was still talking to the doctor, and she handed me this folder full of paperwork, full of resources that didn't even apply to us. They weren't even near where we lived. Where we lived at that time didn't offer a tremendous amount of services because we didn't live in a huge city, but there was one ABA facility that was phenomenal, and I feel like Savannah just worked wonderfully, and some of those skills she still uses today. And they just handed me this packet and were like, okay, on your way. And they did ask me, do you have any questions? Oh my God, do I have any questions? I have a million questions. The only question I could think of at that time was, how severe are we talking? Because I had a general knowledge of autism. I didn't really know a lot, but I knew, basic things, right? And she said, we're talking severe, And I said, really? I'm just shocked because this is our daughter, this is someone that we think all her little quirks are adorable, and that just makes her who she is. It's not a diagnosis. And now you're putting a label on my baby. And this is something that's going to follow her the rest of her life. I remember that. And I was resentful because I thought, why would they put this label on her? Why would they slap this on a 3-year-old? Or she was almost 3. She was a month away from being 3. And I was still just shocked. And so I took all of the paperwork and thought, where do I go from here? I mean, for anyone that's ever received a diagnosis, any type of diagnosis, I know your first reaction is shock. Sometimes it probably could be, relief because you finally have an answer. I wasn't really looking for an answer. I just thought, let's just see what they say. I really did. I went in there with a very open mind. So we had about an 1.5-hour car ride home, and my husband was quiet. And I was quiet for a while, just kind of trying to absorb everything they said and remember it and think about it. And I remember looking over at him and I said, so what do you think? Because he was quiet and I could tell that he was dealing with it too, And he said, there's nothing wrong with that little girl. And I remember he turned around and looked at her in her car seat and he's like, look at that little girl. Does it look like anything's wrong with her? Nothing's wrong with that little girl. And he said, there's no way that these doctors can diagnose her within a few hours. We've known this little girl for over 2 years. He questioned the doctor's credibility. He was in denial. And maybe we'll do a video and talk to him about his feelings exactly. But I know denial was a big one. So we got home and I'm telling you, you go through all these different stages of emotions. You have this disbelief. Then you have resentfulness and you have anger and you just go through all these emotions. There's just stages of grief, I think, with a diagnosis. You go through stages. And eventually you get to acceptance. I don't want to say I accepted it right away, but I was ready to take it on. Okay, let's find therapy. Let's start working. I knew that we were running out of time because it is a crucial time before a child turns 5 developmentally to get in as much therapy and work with them as hard as you can. Because once they turn 5, that changes a lot. So I wanted to find resources. I wanted to connect. And then I thought, how are we going to tell everyone this? This is devastating. And I remember the first family member that we told, because this person happened to come over that day, and they just kind of took it very lightly. They're like, she'll be fine. So that's it. That was diagnosis day. So maybe you experience the same things, but that was ours.